Human beings possess a remarkable ability to believe they understand the world. Ask someone how the economy works, and they may confidently explain supply and demand. Ask someone how governments operate, and they may describe policies and institutions with certainty. Ask someone how technology functions, and they may give confident explanations about complex systems. Yet when these explanations are examined closely, something surprising often appears. The understanding is frequently shallow. Not completely wrong, but incomplete, simplified, sometimes even mistaken. This phenomenon reveals a paradox at the heart of human cognition. People often feel more confident in their understanding than their knowledge actually supports. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as the illusion of knowledge, and it is one of the most powerful forces shaping human belief, conversation, and decision-making. Knowledge is not only about information. It is also about a feeling. When people say they understand something, they are often describing an internal sense of certainty. That sense of certainty can be strong, convincing, even reassuring. But the feeling of knowing is not always connected to actual comprehension. The brain produces a sensation of understanding when ideas appear familiar or coherent. If an explanation sounds plausible and fits within existing beliefs, the mind may accept it quickly. But acceptance is not the same as deep understanding. In many cases, people store simplified explanations that feel complete even though they contain significant gaps. The illusion of knowledge arises when these simplified explanations are mistaken for full comprehension. The illusion of knowledge becomes especially powerful in modern societies. Today, individuals interact with systems that are extraordinarily complex. Electric power grids, global financial markets, advanced medical technologies, artificial intelligence. Few individuals understand these systems completely. In fact, even experts typically specialize in only a small portion of these fields. Yet most people interact with these technologies daily. They use smartphones. They rely on transportation systems. They trust medical treatments. Because these systems function smoothly most of the time, people often feel as though they understand them. But familiarity with outcomes does not equal understanding of mechanisms. A person may use a smartphone every day without understanding the engineering principles behind wireless communication. The illusion of knowledge emerges because everyday experience provides the appearance of comprehension. One reason humans function successfully despite limited individual understanding is that knowledge is distributed across society. This phenomenon is sometimes described as collective intelligence. No single individual understands every aspect of modern civilization. But knowledge is shared across communities. Engineers understand infrastructure. Doctors understand medicine. Scientists investigate natural laws. Teachers transmit knowledge across generations. Each individual contributes a small portion to a larger system of understanding. In this way, society functions as a vast network of distributed expertise. However, the presence of collective knowledge can create a subtle cognitive illusion. Because knowledge exists somewhere within the community, individuals may feel as though they personally possess that knowledge. In reality, they rely on the expertise of others. One of the most fascinating demonstrations of the illusion of knowledge is called the illusion of explanatory depth. Researchers discovered that people often believe they understand everyday objects or systems until they attempt to explain them in detail. For example, someone might claim to understand how a zipper works. But when asked to describe the exact mechanical process step by step, they may struggle. The same happens with bicycles, toilets, or even simple tools. Before attempting the explanation, people rate their understanding as high. After attempting the explanation, they realize their understanding is limited. This realization reduces their confidence. The illusion disappears. This experiment reveals something important about human cognition. Understanding often feels deeper than it actually is. The human brain relies heavily on simplified mental models. These models allow individuals to navigate the world without analyzing every detail. For example, a person may understand that turning a key starts a car. They may not understand combustion engines. But the simplified model allows them to operate the vehicle successfully. This efficiency is essential. Without simplified models, daily life would become overwhelming. However, simplified models also create the illusion of mastery. People may believe they understand a system simply because they know how to interact with it. But interaction and understanding are not identical. Conversations often reinforce the illusion of knowledge. When people discuss topics casually, explanations rarely require technical precision. Participants may exchange general ideas that feel coherent. Agreement within the conversation strengthens confidence. But agreement does not guarantee accuracy. In many cases, individuals rely on shared assumptions that have never been examined carefully. Social environments can therefore reinforce beliefs that appear widely accepted but remain poorly understood. This dynamic explains why certain misconceptions can persist across large groups of people. Interestingly, true experts often display greater intellectual humility than beginners. This pattern occurs because deeper knowledge reveals greater complexity. The more a person studies a subject, the more they discover how many unanswered questions remain. A beginner may learn a few basic principles and feel confident. An expert understands the intricate details and uncertainties involved. This awareness produces caution. Experts often speak in probabilities rather than absolute statements. They recognize that knowledge evolves over time. This humility reflects deeper understanding rather than weakness. The illusion of knowledge can create serious consequences. Overconfidence may lead individuals to make decisions based on incomplete understanding. It can encourage the spread of misinformation. It can discourage curiosity. When people believe they already understand something, they may stop asking questions. Learning slows down. Critical examination disappears. Over time, this overconfidence can create intellectual stagnation. Recognizing the illusion of knowledge is therefore an important step toward intellectual growth. Paradoxically, genuine understanding often begins with recognizing how much we do not know. This realization does not weaken reasoning. It strengthens it. When individuals acknowledge the limits of their knowledge, curiosity increases. Questions become more important. Exploration becomes more rewarding. The illusion of knowledge dissolves, and in its place emerges a more disciplined form of inquiry. In the next chapter, we will examine how humans mistake familiarity for understanding. Why repeated exposure to ideas can create confidence without comprehension, and how this psychological effect shapes belief, persuasion, and public discourse. Chapter 2: Familiarity and the Illusion of Understanding. One of the most powerful forces shaping human belief is not knowledge. It is familiarity. Ideas that appear repeatedly begin to feel natural, comfortable, even obvious. Over time, this familiarity can produce a powerful illusion. The illusion that we understand something simply because we have heard about it many times. But familiarity is not the same as comprehension. An idea can be repeated thousands of times without being fully understood. Yet the mind often interprets repetition as evidence of truth and understanding. This psychological tendency plays a significant role in shaping opinions, cultural narratives, and public discourse. To understand why familiarity feels so convincing, we must examine how the brain processes information. When the brain processes information easily, it produces a sensation of mental fluency. Fluency simply means that an idea feels easy to think about. Words are recognized quickly. Concepts appear coherent. Sentences seem smooth and understandable. This ease of processing creates a subtle psychological signal. The brain interprets fluency as a sign of reliability. If something is easy to process, it feels more believable. This phenomenon is known as the fluency effect. For example, statements written in clear, simple language often appear more convincing than statements written in complex technical language, even when the information is identical. Similarly, repeated exposure to a statement makes it easier for the brain to process. And that ease creates the impression that the statement must be accurate. But the brain is not evaluating truth in this moment. It is evaluating effort. The less effort required to process an idea, the more credible it feels. Repetition strengthens familiarity, and familiarity strengthens belief. This simple relationship explains why repetition has been used throughout history in advertising, propaganda, and political messaging. When a message is repeated frequently, it becomes mentally fluent. The brain begins to recognize it instantly. That recognition produces a sense of certainty, even when the message itself has not been carefully examined. This phenomenon is sometimes called the illusory truth effect. Experiments have shown that people are more likely to rate repeated statements as true, even when those statements were initially identified as false. The repetition gradually weakens skepticism. The mind begins to treat the statement as part of the background of accepted knowledge. In modern societies, the power of familiarity has become even more influential. Digital media allows information to spread at extraordinary speed. Ideas circulate through social networks, news feeds, and online discussions. Algorithms often prioritize content that receives attention. This attention can amplify repetition. Certain messages appear repeatedly across multiple platforms. When individuals encounter the same idea in several places, it can feel widely accepted. The repetition strengthens familiarity, and familiarity strengthens perceived credibility. This dynamic can affect both accurate information and misinformation. The brain does not automatically distinguish between them based on repetition alone. Critical evaluation requires conscious effort. Familiar ideas also feel psychologically comfortable. They align with existing beliefs. They require little mental effort to process. Unfamiliar ideas, by contrast, may feel confusing or uncomfortable. They require additional analysis. They challenge established mental models. As a result, people often prefer information that reinforces what they already know. This preference contributes to intellectual stability, but it can also limit intellectual growth. If individuals rely exclusively on familiar ideas, they may resist learning new perspectives. Curiosity weakens. Understanding becomes static. Disciplined thinkers recognize this tendency. They intentionally explore unfamiliar concepts to expand their intellectual horizons. Familiarity can create the impression of expertise. When people hear about a topic frequently, they may feel qualified to discuss it. They recognize the terminology. They understand the general narrative. But deeper understanding requires more than recognition. It requires knowledge of mechanisms, evidence, context. Without these elements, understanding remains superficial. For example, many individuals feel comfortable discussing economic trends, technological innovation, or medical research. But the underlying systems behind these topics often involve layers of complexity. Superficial familiarity can mask this complexity. The illusion of knowledge persists. An interesting contrast appears when comparing experts and non-experts discussing complex topics. Non-experts often speak confidently using simplified explanations. Experts often speak cautiously. They acknowledge uncertainties. They qualify their conclusions. This difference can sometimes confuse audiences. Confidence may appear persuasive, but expert caution often reflects deeper understanding. Because experts recognize the limitations of available evidence. They understand how many variables influence complex systems. Their caution reflects intellectual honesty. Recognizing this pattern helps listeners interpret expertise more accurately. Confidence alone does not indicate knowledge. Overcoming the illusion of familiarity requires deliberate effort. One effective strategy is to ask deeper questions about ideas that feel obvious. How exactly does this process work? What evidence supports this explanation? What assumptions might be hidden within this narrative? Attempting to explain a concept in detail often reveals gaps in understanding. This realization can feel uncomfortable, but it is also intellectually valuable, because recognizing the limits of knowledge opens the door to genuine learning. One of the best ways to test understanding is through explanation. If you believe you understand an idea, attempt to explain it clearly to another person, or write the explanation down step by step. During this process, areas of confusion often become visible. Concepts that seemed clear in the mind may become difficult to articulate. This exercise forces the brain to organize knowledge more precisely. It transforms vague familiarity into structured understanding. Educators often use this technique because teaching others requires deeper comprehension than passive learning. Familiarity does not only influence understanding, it also shapes belief. Ideas that feel familiar often feel trustworthy. This psychological link explains why repeated narratives can become deeply embedded within cultures. Once an idea becomes part of collective familiarity, questioning it may feel strange or uncomfortable. But disciplined thinkers recognize that familiarity and truth are separate concepts. An idea may feel familiar and still be incorrect, or it may feel unfamiliar and still be accurate. Separating these sensations requires conscious reflection. Curiosity acts as a counterbalance to familiarity. Instead of accepting ideas simply because they are well known, curious thinkers ask deeper questions. They investigate underlying mechanisms. They explore alternative explanations. This curiosity transforms familiarity into inquiry. It converts passive recognition into active investigation. Over time, this habit builds genuine understanding, because the mind becomes comfortable exploring complexity rather than avoiding it. Familiarity creates confidence. Confidence can lead to overestimation of understanding. But another psychological force intensifies this illusion even further. Human beings often rely on the knowledge of others without realizing it. We assume that because someone within our community understands a system, we understand it as well. This phenomenon is known as the knowledge network. Chapter 3: The Knowledge Network: Why We Borrow Understanding. Human knowledge is rarely contained within a single mind. Instead, it exists within networks. Families share information across generations. Communities exchange practical skills. Institutions organize specialized expertise. Scientists collaborate through research and experimentation. In this way, knowledge functions as a collective system. Each individual contributes a small portion. No single person understands everything required to sustain modern civilization. And yet civilization functions. Airplanes fly. Hospitals operate. Power grids deliver electricity. Digital communication networks connect billions of people. This extraordinary system works because knowledge is distributed across society. But this distribution creates an unexpected cognitive illusion. People often feel as though they understand systems that they merely rely on others to understand. Consider how many specialized experts are involved in producing something as simple as a smartphone. Engineers design microprocessors. Chemists develop battery materials. Software developers write operating systems. Telecommunications experts manage wireless networks. Manufacturing specialists oversee production. Logistics teams coordinate global supply chains. Most users of smartphones understand only a small fraction of these processes. Yet the device works reliably. Because the system functions smoothly, users often feel comfortable interacting with it. This comfort can create the impression that the system itself is understood. But in reality, The knowledge required to build and maintain the technology is distributed across thousands of specialists. Humans frequently rely on borrowed knowledge. Borrowed knowledge occurs when individuals trust the expertise of others without personally understanding the details. For example, most people trust doctors when receiving medical treatment. They trust engineers who design bridges and buildings. They trust scientists who develop vaccines. This trust allows societies to function efficiently. If every individual had to independently verify every piece of knowledge they relied on, progress would slow dramatically. Borrowed knowledge is therefore essential. However, it also creates a subtle psychological effect. People may begin to confuse access to knowledge with personal possession of that knowledge. They know that someone understands the system, and that awareness creates a sense of confidence. But the understanding belongs to the network, not the individual. Just as societies divide physical labor, they also divide cognitive labor. Farmers specialize in agriculture. Doctors specialize in medicine. Scientists specialize in research. Teachers specialize in education. Each profession develops deep expertise in its own domain. This division of cognitive labor allows knowledge to advance rapidly. Individuals focus their attention on specific problems. They refine their understanding through years of study and experience. But the existence of specialized knowledge also means that most people depend on others for information outside their fields. This dependency is not a weakness. It is a fundamental feature of human civilization. The problem arises when individuals forget that they are relying on borrowed knowledge. They may repeat ideas they have heard from experts. They may use technical vocabulary. They may feel confident discussing complex systems. But their understanding may remain superficial. For example, someone might confidently discuss climate science after reading summaries or news articles. But the underlying models, data analysis, and scientific methods may remain unfamiliar. Similarly, people may debate economic policies without fully understanding economic models or historical data. In these situations, borrowed knowledge can produce an illusion of personal expertise. This illusion becomes especially strong when individuals participate in conversations where others share similar assumptions. Agreement reinforces confidence. But agreement does not guarantee understanding. Because knowledge is distributed across society, individuals must rely on trust. But trust must be balanced with verification. Blind trust can lead to manipulation. Complete distrust can lead to paralysis. Disciplined thinkers develop methods for evaluating the reliability of information sources. They consider the track record of experts. They examine whether claims are supported by evidence. They look for consensus among independent researchers. Scientific institutions often rely on peer review for this purpose. Experts evaluate one another's work before accepting conclusions. This process helps maintain reliability within knowledge networks. When individuals overestimate their understanding, decision-making can become flawed. People may form strong opinions about topics they have not studied deeply. They may underestimate the complexity of policy decisions. They may dismiss expert knowledge in favor of simplified explanations. This overconfidence can influence public debates and social decisions. Complex issues may become reduced to slogans or simplified narratives. Recognizing the limits of personal knowledge helps prevent this problem. It encourages intellectual humility. Intellectual humility is the recognition that personal knowledge has limits. It does not mean abandoning judgment. Rather, it means acknowledging when expertise belongs to others. Disciplined thinkers remain curious about fields outside their own expertise. But they also respect the depth of knowledge required to master those fields. They listen carefully to credible experts. They examine evidence before forming conclusions. And they remain open to revising beliefs when new information appears. This humility strengthens the knowledge network rather than weakening it. Because it encourages cooperation between specialists and learners. Knowledge networks rely not only on learners but also on responsible experts. Experts have a responsibility to communicate clearly. They must explain complex ideas in ways that non-specialists can understand without oversimplifying essential details. Effective communication helps bridge the gap between specialized knowledge and public understanding. When experts fail to communicate clearly, misinformation may fill the gap. Simplified narratives can spread more easily than nuanced explanations. For this reason, the health of knowledge networks depends on transparent communication. Although individuals cannot master every field, they can still strengthen their understanding. Disciplined learners ask thoughtful questions. They explore the reasoning behind expert conclusions. They seek sources that explain underlying mechanisms rather than repeating conclusions alone. Over time, this curiosity expands personal knowledge. It reduces the gap between borrowed knowledge and genuine understanding. And it strengthens the individual's ability to participate thoughtfully within the larger network. The knowledge network reveals an important truth about human cognition. Much of what people believe they understand actually belongs to the collective intelligence of society. Individuals participate in this system. They benefit from it. But they do not personally possess all the knowledge it contains. Recognizing this reality can feel humbling. But it is also empowering. Because it reveals the extraordinary power of collaboration. Human civilization advances not because individuals know everything, but because knowledge is shared across millions of minds. Borrowed knowledge explains why individuals may feel confident about topics they do not fully understand. But the illusion of knowledge is strengthened by another psychological tendency. The human mind prefers explanations that are simple and coherent, even when reality is far more complex. Chapter 4: The Seduction of Simple Explanations. Human beings are natural storytellers. When we encounter complex events, our minds instinctively search for explanations that make sense of them. We want clear causes, clear narratives, clear conclusions. This desire for clarity is not a flaw. It is a cognitive strategy that helps the brain organize information efficiently. But the same strategy that helps us understand the world can also mislead us. Because the world itself is rarely simple. Most events emerge from complicated interactions between many different forces. Economic decisions, social behavior, technological innovation, historical developments, natural systems. These forces often combine in ways that cannot be reduced to a single cause. Yet the human mind strongly prefers explanations that are short, coherent, and easy to remember. This preference creates what we might call the seduction of simple explanations. The brain evolved to understand events through stories. Stories contain characters, actions, and consequences. They allow us to organize complex sequences of events into meaningful structures. For example, when hearing about a business success, people often focus on a single cause. Perhaps the intelligence of a founder. Perhaps a brilliant marketing strategy. Perhaps a bold technological innovation. But in reality, successful outcomes usually involve dozens of contributing factors. Timing, market conditions, access to capital, team collaboration, unexpected opportunities. Narratives simplify these complexities into a single storyline. The result is a compelling explanation that feels satisfying, even if it overlooks important variables. The desire for simple narratives often leads to oversimplified cause-and-effect explanations. Consider historical events. Major political changes are sometimes attributed to the actions of a single leader. But historical transformations typically involve broader forces. Economic conditions, cultural movements, technological developments, international relationships. Focusing on a single cause may make history easier to explain, but it rarely captures the full complexity of the situation. This pattern appears across many fields. Social issues may be reduced to one policy. Economic trends may be attributed to one decision. Scientific discoveries may be credited to a single moment of inspiration. In reality, complex systems rarely have single causes. They emerge from interactions among many variables. Simple explanations feel comfortable because they produce coherence. Coherence means that the explanation fits neatly with our existing beliefs. It forms a clear story. It removes ambiguity. This psychological comfort can make simplified explanations extremely persuasive. But comfort does not guarantee accuracy. In fact, overly coherent explanations may hide the uncertainty and complexity that characterize real-world systems. Disciplined thinkers recognize that genuine understanding often involves uncertainty. Complex explanations may feel less satisfying, but they more accurately reflect reality. Modern communication systems often amplify simplified narratives. News headlines, social media posts, and short-form content encourage quick explanations. Complex topics must be condensed into brief messages. Nuanced analysis may require pages of explanation, but a simplified story can be delivered in seconds. As a result, public conversations often focus on narratives that are easy to share rather than explanations that are most accurate. This dynamic does not necessarily reflect malicious intent. It reflects the practical limitations of communication. However, it does mean that individuals must actively seek deeper explanations if they want to understand complex issues. Simplified explanations often produce false confidence. When an idea appears clear and straightforward, people may assume they fully understand it. But that clarity may result from the omission of critical details. For example, an economic problem might be described as the result of a single policy failure. This explanation may feel convincing, but the actual causes may involve global market forces, regulatory systems, consumer behavior, and technological changes. By focusing on one factor, the explanation becomes easy to understand, but incomplete. False confidence can lead to poor decision-making because individuals may underestimate the complexity of the problem. Many important issues exist within complex systems. A complex system contains many interacting components. Small changes in one part of the system can produce large consequences elsewhere. For example, ecosystems involve relationships between plants, animals, climate conditions, and human activity. Altering one element, such as introducing a new species, can produce unexpected ripple effects. Similarly, financial markets involve countless interactions between investors, institutions, regulations, and technological systems. Understanding these systems requires examining relationships rather than isolated events. Simplified explanations often ignore these relationships. Disciplined thinkers look for patterns of interaction instead of single causes. One way to move beyond simple explanations is to focus on mechanisms. A mechanism explains how a process actually works. Instead of stating that a policy caused economic growth, for example, a mechanistic explanation would describe the chain of events linking the policy to economic outcomes. Which incentives changed? How did businesses respond? How did consumers adjust their behavior? By tracing these mechanisms, thinkers gain deeper understanding. Mechanisms reveal the steps between cause and effect. This approach reduces reliance on vague or oversimplified narratives. Complex explanations often feel less satisfying than simple ones. They may contain uncertainty. They may involve multiple interacting causes. They may require patience to understand fully. But complexity reflects the structure of reality. Disciplined thinkers learn to tolerate this complexity. They resist the temptation to reduce every problem to a single narrative. Instead, they examine multiple perspectives. They explore competing explanations. They remain open to the possibility that no single explanation captures the full truth. Real understanding often develops in layers. At first, individuals may learn simplified models of how systems work. These models provide a basic foundation. As knowledge grows, new layers of complexity appear. More variables become visible. Interactions between systems become clearer. Experts in many fields follow this process. Beginners learn simplified principles. Advanced learners gradually incorporate more detailed knowledge. Understanding deepens over time. Recognizing this layered structure helps individuals remain patient with complexity. It reminds them that learning is a gradual process rather than an instant revelation. Stories help us communicate ideas, but structures help us understand reality. Disciplined thinkers move beyond narrative explanations toward structural analysis. They examine systems, mechanisms, and relationships. They ask not only what happened, but how and why it happened. This shift transforms thinking. It replaces simple storytelling with deeper investigation. And it reveals patterns that simplified narratives often hide. The seduction of simple explanations shows how easily the mind can mistake clarity for truth. But another powerful force strengthens this illusion even further. Confidence. People often assume that confident speakers possess deeper knowledge. Chapter 5. Confidence and the Illusion of Expertise. Confidence is one of the most persuasive signals in human communication. When someone speaks with certainty, people often assume that person possesses deep knowledge. Their tone appears decisive. Their explanations seem clear. Their conclusions sound convincing. Confidence creates the impression of authority. But confidence and expertise are not the same thing. In many situations, individuals who possess limited knowledge may express greater confidence than those with deeper understanding. This phenomenon reveals another powerful layer of the illusion of knowledge. The mind often mistakes certainty of expression for accuracy of understanding. To understand why this happens, we must examine how confidence functions within human psychology. Confidence is an emotional state. It is the feeling that a belief or conclusion is correct. But feelings are not always reliable indicators of reality. Confidence can be influenced by many factors unrelated to actual knowledge. Past experiences, social reinforcement, personal identity, emotional commitment to a belief. When people encounter ideas that align with their existing views, confidence often increases automatically. Agreement feels validating. The mind interprets that validation as confirmation. But this process can occur even when the underlying belief is incomplete or incorrect. Confidence may reflect familiarity rather than accuracy. One of the most well-known psychological patterns related to confidence is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Researchers discovered that individuals with limited knowledge in a field often overestimate their competence. At the same time, individuals with greater expertise tend to estimate their abilities more cautiously. Why does this happen? Because recognizing the limits of one's knowledge requires understanding the subject itself. When someone knows very little about a topic, they may not realize how complex it truly is. Without awareness of complexity, confidence grows easily. But as knowledge increases, individuals encounter more nuances, exceptions, and uncertainties. This deeper awareness often reduces overconfidence. Experts understand that complex systems rarely produce simple answers. Interestingly, genuine expertise often produces a different style of communication. Experts tend to qualify their statements. They acknowledge uncertainty. They describe probabilities rather than absolute conclusions. To someone unfamiliar with the field, this caution may appear like hesitation. But it reflects intellectual honesty. Experts recognize the boundaries of available evidence. They understand the limits of current knowledge. They know that new discoveries may refine or revise existing conclusions. This humility is not a weakness. It is a sign of deeper understanding. Despite the complexity of expertise, confident speakers often attract attention. Confidence is easy to interpret. Listeners may assume that someone who speaks forcefully must possess strong evidence. In debates, confident arguments can overshadow cautious explanations. This dynamic appears frequently in public discourse, political discussions, media commentary, social media conversations. Individuals who present simple explanations with strong certainty may appear persuasive even when their reasoning lacks depth. Meanwhile, careful experts may struggle to communicate nuanced ideas within environments that reward quick, decisive statements. Understanding this dynamic helps individuals evaluate arguments more critically. Confidence should invite examination, not automatic trust. Confidence also spreads through social influence. When many individuals express certainty about an idea, others may adopt similar confidence. Agreement reinforces belief. Communities may develop shared convictions that feel unquestionable within the group. This social reinforcement strengthens the illusion of expertise. Members of the group may feel collectively knowledgeable even when the underlying information has not been carefully examined. This dynamic can occur in political movements, online communities, and cultural narratives. Once confidence becomes widespread, questioning the belief may feel uncomfortable or even threatening. Disciplined thinkers remain aware of this influence. They evaluate ideas independently rather than relying solely on group confidence. The most reliable way to distinguish expertise from confidence is through evidence. Experts base their conclusions on data, research, and tested methods. They can explain how evidence supports their claims. They can describe the reasoning process connecting observations to conclusions. Confident speakers who lack expertise may rely more heavily on rhetorical techniques. They may repeat slogans. They may appeal to emotion. They may dismiss opposing views without examining them. These patterns often reveal the difference between persuasion and understanding. Disciplined thinkers focus on the quality of evidence rather than the intensity of conviction. Intellectual humility plays a crucial role in overcoming the illusion of expertise. Humility allows individuals to recognize the limits of their knowledge. It encourages learning rather than defensive argument. When people accept that they may not fully understand a topic, curiosity increases. They ask questions. They seek reliable sources. They explore deeper explanations. This attitude transforms conversations. Instead of competing to appear knowledgeable, participants focus on discovering truth. Over time, intellectual humility strengthens both personal understanding and collective knowledge. Evaluating expertise requires attention to several factors. First, consider whether the individual has demonstrated knowledge within the relevant field. Second, examine whether their conclusions are supported by evidence and reasoning. Third, observe whether their views align with broader expert consensus or stand in isolation. Finally, consider whether the individual acknowledges uncertainty and complexity. Experts rarely claim absolute certainty in complex domains. These indicators help distinguish genuine expertise from persuasive confidence. The illusion of expertise does not only affect others. It can influence our own thinking as well. Everyone occasionally overestimates their understanding. Recognizing this tendency requires self-awareness. Disciplined thinkers regularly examine their own beliefs. They ask themselves, "Do I truly understand this subject? Or am I relying on simplified explanations? Am I repeating ideas I have heard from others without examining the evidence?" This self-examination strengthens intellectual honesty. It prevents confidence from drifting too far beyond knowledge. In many situations, the most rational position is thoughtful uncertainty. Instead of claiming complete understanding, disciplined thinkers acknowledge when evidence is incomplete. They remain open to new information. They treat beliefs as provisional rather than permanent. This approach may appear less dramatic than confident declarations, but it produces more reliable conclusions over time. Thoughtful uncertainty protects the mind from the illusion of expertise. Confidence can make limited knowledge appear convincing. Simplified narratives can create the illusion of understanding. Borrowed knowledge can disguise the limits of personal expertise. But another powerful factor strengthens these illusions even further. Human beings tend to prefer information that confirms their existing beliefs. Chapter 6: Confirmation Bias, the Mind's Hidden Filter. Human beings rarely approach information as neutral observers. When we encounter new ideas, our minds do not simply record them. Instead, we interpret them through existing beliefs, expectations, and assumptions. This process creates a powerful psychological filter. Information that supports our beliefs tends to be accepted quickly. Information that contradicts them often receives greater scrutiny, or may be dismissed entirely. This tendency is known as confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is one of the most influential forces shaping human belief. It operates quietly, often without conscious awareness. Yet it influences how people interpret news, scientific evidence, political arguments, and everyday experiences. Understanding confirmation bias is essential for anyone seeking genuine knowledge, because it reveals how easily the mind can become trapped inside its own assumptions. Confirmation bias operates through several related mechanisms. First, people tend to seek information that supports their beliefs. When researching a topic, individuals may naturally look for sources that align with their existing views. Second, people tend to interpret ambiguous information in ways that favor their beliefs. The same evidence can be understood differently depending on the expectations of the observer. Third, people often remember supporting information more easily than contradictory information. Memories that reinforce beliefs feel more meaningful and are recalled more frequently. Together, these tendencies create a powerful feedback loop. Beliefs influence what information we encounter. That information reinforces the beliefs. Over time, the cycle strengthens confidence, even if the underlying evidence remains incomplete. One reason confirmation bias is so powerful is that agreement feels psychologically rewarding. When new information aligns with our beliefs, the mind experiences a sense of validation. The idea fits smoothly within existing mental frameworks. Little effort is required to process it. In contrast, information that contradicts our beliefs often produces discomfort. The mind must reconcile conflicting ideas. Existing assumptions may need to be revised. This process requires cognitive effort and emotional adjustment. As a result, the brain often prefers agreement over contradiction. It gravitates toward ideas that reinforce familiar narratives. Confirmation bias appears in many everyday situations. People who believe a particular diet is effective may notice every example of someone losing weight while ignoring cases where the diet failed. Individuals who believe a certain group behaves in a particular way may focus on examples that confirm the stereotype. In relationships, partners may interpret ambiguous behavior according to their expectations. A gesture may be seen as kindness or indifference depending on the observer's prior beliefs. These interpretations may feel completely natural, but they reflect the mind's tendency to select evidence that supports its expectations. Modern media environments can intensify confirmation bias. People often choose news sources that align with their perspectives. Algorithms on digital platforms may recommend content similar to what users have previously engaged with. Over time, individuals may encounter information that consistently reinforces their existing beliefs. Opposing perspectives may become less visible. This phenomenon is sometimes described as an information echo chamber. Within such environments, beliefs become increasingly confident, because most available information appears to support them. But the apparent consensus may reflect selective exposure rather than balanced evidence. Disciplined thinkers actively seek diverse sources of information to counter this effect. Confirmation bias becomes even stronger when beliefs become tied to identity. Political views, cultural values, and moral beliefs often form part of a person's sense of self. When these beliefs are challenged, the mind may interpret the challenge as a personal threat. Defensive reactions appear. Arguments are dismissed quickly. Evidence is scrutinized selectively. This defensive response is understandable. Identity provides stability and belonging. But when beliefs become inseparable from identity, intellectual flexibility becomes difficult. Learning requires the ability to examine ideas without feeling personally attacked. The scientific method was developed partly to reduce the influence of confirmation bias. Researchers design experiments that test whether hypotheses might be wrong rather than simply seeking evidence that supports them. Peer review allows other experts to evaluate findings independently. Replication studies attempt to reproduce results to ensure reliability. These practices create a system in which ideas must survive scrutiny from multiple perspectives. Although scientists are not immune to confirmation bias, these institutional safeguards help reduce its influence. They transform individual reasoning into collective evaluation. One of the most powerful ways to counter confirmation bias is to actively search for disconfirming evidence. Instead of asking, "What supports my belief?" disciplined thinkers ask, "What evidence would challenge this belief?" This shift in perspective encourages intellectual honesty. If a belief remains strong after confronting opposing evidence, confidence becomes more justified. If the belief weakens, the thinker gains an opportunity to revise their understanding. Either outcome improves the accuracy of knowledge. Confirmation bias often turns reasoning into defense. People search for arguments that protect existing beliefs. But curiosity transforms reasoning into exploration. Curious thinkers welcome questions. They investigate unfamiliar perspectives. They examine evidence from multiple angles. This approach does not require abandoning all convictions, but it encourages openness. It treats knowledge as a process of discovery rather than a battlefield of competing identities. Beliefs that cannot change become fragile. They resist new information. They depend on constant reinforcement. Flexible beliefs are stronger. They adapt when evidence changes. They evolve as understanding deepens. Disciplined thinkers treat beliefs as models rather than permanent truths. Models can be improved. They can be revised. They can be replaced when better explanations appear. This flexibility allows knowledge to grow over time. Perhaps the most challenging aspect of confirmation bias is recognizing it within our own thinking. It is easy to observe bias in others, but personal assumptions often feel invisible. Developing awareness requires self-reflection. When encountering information that strongly supports your beliefs, pause and ask, "Have I examined opposing evidence? Am I interpreting this information fairly? What alternative explanations might exist?" These questions create distance between belief and evaluation. They allow reasoning to operate more carefully. Confirmation bias shapes how we gather and interpret information. It strengthens beliefs by filtering evidence. But another psychological tendency deepens the illusion of knowledge even further. Humans often mistake information for understanding. Simply knowing facts can create the impression of mastery. But facts alone do not reveal how systems work. Chapter 7: Information versus Understanding, the Depth Illusion. In the modern world, information is everywhere. Facts, statistics, headlines, research papers, social media posts, expert interviews, data visualizations. Human beings are surrounded by an unprecedented amount of knowledge. With a few clicks, someone can learn about quantum physics, ancient history, neuroscience, or global economics. This easy access to information has transformed education and communication. But it has also created a new cognitive illusion. Many people assume that possessing information is the same as understanding. Yet these are very different things. Information consists of facts. Understanding consists of relationships between those facts. Information tells us what. Understanding tells us why and how. Without examining the connections between ideas, facts alone can create the impression of knowledge without producing genuine comprehension. For most of human history, information was scarce. Books were rare. Scientific knowledge developed slowly. Education was limited to small portions of society. In those conditions, acquiring information required effort and patience. Today, the situation is reversed. Information is abundant. The challenge is no longer finding facts, it is interpreting them correctly. Millions of pieces of information appear daily across digital platforms. News updates, scientific discoveries, opinion articles, technical explanations. Each piece of information may be accurate on its own, but without context, the meaning of these facts can be misunderstood. Understanding requires integration. It requires connecting information into coherent systems of explanation. Imagine someone memorizing dozens of facts about biology. They may know the names of organs, chemical compounds, and cellular structures. But if they cannot explain how those elements interact within living systems, their knowledge remains fragmented. True understanding emerges when facts are placed within frameworks. Frameworks reveal relationships. They explain how individual pieces fit together. For example, the theory of evolution provides a framework for understanding how species change over time. Without that framework, biological facts may appear disconnected. Frameworks transform scattered information into meaningful patterns. Disciplined thinkers seek frameworks rather than isolated facts. One danger of information abundance is the shallow knowledge trap. People may accumulate small pieces of information from many topics. They recognize terminology. They recall headlines. They remember simplified explanations. This accumulation can produce the impression of broad knowledge. But when deeper questions arise, gaps become visible. Superficial familiarity does not provide the tools needed to analyze complex systems. The shallow knowledge trap often appears in public discussions. Participants reference facts but may not understand the underlying processes connecting them. As a result, debates may revolve around isolated data points rather than deeper analysis. Surface knowledge feels satisfying because it creates a sense of progress. Learning a new fact produces a small reward in the brain. Recognition feels like accomplishment. But deeper understanding requires sustained effort. It involves connecting multiple ideas, examining cause and effect, identifying patterns across disciplines. This process takes time. As a result, the mind sometimes prefers accumulating facts to developing structured understanding. Disciplined thinkers resist this tendency. They treat each new fact as a starting point rather than a final conclusion. One way to deepen understanding is to focus on mechanisms. A mechanism explains the process through which something happens. For example, knowing that exercise improves health is a fact. Understanding the mechanisms behind that improvement requires examining physiological processes. How muscles respond to stress. How the cardiovascular system adapts. How metabolism changes over time. Mechanisms reveal the pathways connecting cause and effect. They transform surface knowledge into deeper comprehension. Experts in many fields rely heavily on mechanistic explanations. Because mechanisms allow predictions. If you understand how a system works, you can anticipate how it will respond to change. Mental models play a crucial role in transforming information into understanding. A mental model provides a simplified representation of a complex system. It allows the mind to simulate relationships between elements. For example, economists use models to understand how supply and demand interact. Engineers use models to analyze structural stability. Ecologists use models to study interactions within ecosystems. These models do not capture every detail of reality, but they provide frameworks that organize information meaningfully. Without models, facts remain scattered. With models, facts become components of a coherent system. True understanding often emerges through synthesis. Synthesis occurs when ideas from different sources combine to create new insights. For example, understanding climate systems requires knowledge from multiple disciplines: atmospheric science, oceanography, physics, chemistry, ecology. Each field provides pieces of the puzzle. Synthesis integrates these pieces into a larger picture. Disciplined thinkers actively pursue this integration. They explore connections between ideas. They examine how knowledge from one field may illuminate problems in another. This interdisciplinary approach strengthens understanding. Information abundance encourages breadth of knowledge. People can explore many subjects quickly, but deep understanding often requires sustained attention within a specific area. Experts spend years studying particular systems. They analyze data, conduct experiments, test theories. Their knowledge becomes layered. They move beyond surface facts into detailed structures of explanation. Disciplined thinkers seek balance between breadth and depth. Breadth provides perspective. Depth provides insight. Together, they create powerful intellectual capability. Information alone cannot replace understanding. Facts must be interpreted. Relationships must be analyzed. Patterns must be discovered. This process requires critical thinking. It requires patience and intellectual curiosity. Disciplined thinkers treat information as raw material. They transform that material into understanding through analysis and reflection. By doing so, they avoid the illusion that access to information automatically produces knowledge. The illusion of knowledge appears in many forms. Familiarity creates confidence. Borrowed knowledge disguises the limits of personal expertise. Simple explanations replace complex systems. Confidence mimics expertise. Confirmation bias filters information. And facts accumulate without forming true understanding. Chapter 8: Escaping the Illusion of Knowledge. Throughout this audiobook, we have explored a powerful paradox of the human mind. People often feel confident in their understanding of the world. Yet that confidence frequently exceeds the depth of their knowledge. Familiar ideas can feel like understanding. Borrowed expertise can feel like personal mastery. Simple explanations can disguise complex systems. Confidence can mimic expertise. Facts can accumulate without forming meaningful frameworks. Together, these forces create the illusion of knowledge. Recognizing this illusion is not an admission of weakness. It is the beginning of intellectual clarity. Because once we see the illusion, we gain the ability to move beyond it. The most important step toward genuine understanding is intellectual humility. Humility means recognizing that knowledge always has limits. No individual understands every system they interact with. No theory explains every detail of reality. No expert possesses perfect certainty. Acknowledging these limits does not weaken reasoning. It strengthens it. Humility encourages curiosity. It invites questions rather than conclusions. It allows individuals to update their beliefs as new evidence appears. Great thinkers throughout history have shared this quality. They treated knowledge as an evolving process rather than a finished product. The illusion of knowledge often disappears when deeper questions are asked. Instead of accepting explanations at face value, disciplined thinkers investigate further. How exactly does this system work? What mechanisms connect cause and effect? What evidence supports this conclusion? What assumptions might be hidden within this explanation? These questions transform passive acceptance into active inquiry. Each question exposes layers of complexity that simplified narratives often conceal. Over time, The habit of questioning strengthens intellectual discipline. In many conversations, people express opinions quickly. Opinions feel natural. They provide a sense of certainty and identity. But opinions formed without investigation often rest on incomplete information. Disciplined thinkers shift their focus from defending opinions to exploring evidence. Instead of asking, "How can I prove my view correct?" they ask, "What evidence reveals the truth of this situation?" This shift transforms discussion. Debates become opportunities for discovery rather than contests of persuasion. Evidence plays a central role in overcoming the illusion of knowledge. Reliable evidence comes from observation, experimentation, and systematic analysis. Scientific research provides one example, but evidence can also appear in historical records, statistical data, and careful documentation. Disciplined thinkers learn to distinguish between anecdote and evidence. A personal story may be powerful, but it does not necessarily represent broader reality. Evidence examines patterns across many observations. It reveals relationships that individual experiences cannot capture. Evaluating evidence carefully helps separate genuine knowledge from persuasive narratives. Clear thinking requires consistent habits. Just as physical strength develops through exercise, intellectual strength develops through practice. Disciplined thinkers cultivate habits that support deeper understanding. They read carefully. They examine arguments. They analyze evidence. They reflect on their own assumptions. These habits gradually strengthen the architecture of the mind. Each act of careful reasoning reinforces intellectual clarity. Curiosity plays a vital role in escaping the illusion of knowledge. Curious thinkers approach unfamiliar ideas with interest rather than defensiveness. They explore topics beyond their immediate expertise. They investigate mechanisms behind everyday systems. They remain open to learning from unexpected sources. Curiosity transforms ignorance from a source of embarrassment into an invitation to explore. The curious mind never stops asking questions. And each question expands the boundaries of understanding. Because knowledge is distributed across society, individuals benefit from learning from experts. But learning from experts does not mean passive acceptance. Disciplined thinkers evaluate expert claims thoughtfully. They examine evidence. They consider the consensus within relevant fields. They remain aware that even expert knowledge evolves over time. By combining respect for expertise with careful evaluation, individuals strengthen their participation in the collective knowledge network. Reality is complex. Systems interact in unpredictable ways. Scientific discoveries reveal deeper layers of uncertainty. Accepting this complexity can feel uncomfortable. Simple explanations provide clarity and emotional comfort. But disciplined thinkers learn to tolerate ambiguity. They recognize that understanding often involves probabilities rather than absolute certainty. This tolerance for complexity allows them to explore deeper explanations rather than settling for superficial answers. True understanding emerges when information becomes organized within frameworks. Mental models, scientific theories, historical patterns, logical structures. These frameworks help explain relationships between ideas. They allow thinkers to move beyond isolated facts toward integrated knowledge. Developing such frameworks requires time and reflection. But once they are established, they allow individuals to interpret new information more effectively. Escaping the illusion of knowledge does not happen once. It is an ongoing process. Each new discovery reveals additional questions. Each new insight exposes deeper layers of complexity. Learning becomes a continuous journey rather than a final destination. Disciplined thinkers embrace this process. They treat knowledge as a living system, always expanding, always evolving. At first glance, the illusion of knowledge may appear discouraging. It reveals how easily the mind can mistake familiarity for comprehension. But it also reveals something extraordinary about human intelligence. The ability to recognize our own limitations. The ability to question our assumptions. The ability to refine our understanding continuously. These abilities allow knowledge to grow across generations. Each discovery builds upon earlier insights. Each correction improves the accuracy of human understanding. The greatest thinkers are not those who believe they know everything. They are those who see clearly where knowledge ends and inquiry begins. They approach the world with curiosity. They question simple explanations. They examine evidence carefully. And they remain open to the possibility that deeper understanding always awaits. The illusion of knowledge fades when the mind becomes disciplined, curious, and humble. And in that clarity, the human intellect reveals its most powerful ability. Not merely to believe that it understands the world, but to continually discover how much more there is to learn.